Hi, my name is Vivien Jovet. I'm the team lead for Coder Studio development team at Toro. In this video, we'll take a look at the new Toro Coder Studio HTTP client. The HTTP client is a part of the application where you can configure HTTP requests, send them, and analyze the response. So let's first open this HTTP client. So to open it, you can click on the double arrow icon on the main toolbar. When you open it, you will see that there is a new view for the HTTP client at the bottom. So let's make that a bit bigger. Alright, so over here, that's where you configure your HTTP request. You can have multiple tabs open, so each tab is one HTTP request. So let's configure an HTTP request and see how it works. So first over here, you can configure the HTTP method, so we support all of that. So let's pick post for this one. Then over here on the side, that's where you enter your URL. So I'm gonna enter one. There. So at the bottom here, you have a bunch of tabs. The first tab is the info tab. So you can enter the name of the request. So for example, my awesome request. And then in the description, the nice thing is that you can use Markdown. So you can format it nicely and maybe give it some links or whatnot. The next tab is for the parameters. So that's for path parameters. Sometimes they're called path variables, and query parameters. So to add a path parameter, you need to enter it in the URL. So for example, I can type / and then type the name of my path parameter. So for example, path param. Then I press enter, and it will automatically format it with the open braces and closing braces. So that's the syntax for a path parameter. So when you add one in the URL, you will see that it's automatically adding it to the parameters tab. So that's where you can set the value. So to set the value, you can use the context menu or the shortcut command enter. So let's enter that. You can give it a description as well so that you can remember what's the use case of that path parameter. And then you can also add query parameters. So to add a query parameter, you press the green plus button here or use the Alt-A shortcut. So give it a name. So let's say my query param. And then same thing, you can give it a value. Alright. Next thing is the body. So we support different type of body for the request. We have the raw text, the JSON, XML, YAML, form data, form URL encoded, and binary. So let's first try the JSON one. For the JSON one, let's give it a very simple JSON. Let's say message, then test. We also support authentication. So we have basic authentication, OAuth 1 and OAuth 2. So let's first try basic authentication. So I'm gonna enter some credentials in there. Alright. Next tab is for the headers. And you can see that since we configured already the body with JSON and the authentication with basic, we already have those headers set up in the headers tab. So we have the content type and the authorization. So to add another header, you can press the green button here or the Alt-A shortcut. So let's give it a name. And the nice thing here is when you want to enter a name, you can use the content assist to help you. So you can press Control space. And when you do so, you'll get the list of the possible headers. And you can see that they also have a description. So in this case, let's type accept. Again, you can use content assist to help you with completing it. So let's use the accept. And then let's edit the value. Same thing, you have content assist, so control space, and then I get the possible value for it. And they also have a description. Alright, so same thing for the header. You can set a description for them if you have custom header, for example. And another thing is that if you're setting headers, and for example, you don't want to send them with the request for testing, then you can uncheck it here and it just won't be sent with the request. Alright, so now that we have request configured, let's send it. So to send the request, you can press on the send button here, or you can use the command shift enter. So let's send that. Alright, so now we have our response. So on the top over here, you can see we have the status, we have the time it took to send and receive the request. And when you hover over it, you'll get more detailed information about it. So you can get, for example, the download time if there's any download. And same thing for the size in bytes. When you hover over it, you'll get the details, so the body size and the header size. And then over here, you get 3 tabs. The first one for the body. You can see that here we receive a JSON body, so automatically the JSON viewer was selected for it. And here you can analyze the response, so you can see that the service that we get here is simply an echo service, so it will just send you as a response what you send as a request. So you can see that for the path, the value of the parameter was injected. Same thing for the query parameter. And then you can see that we have our authorization header, the accept. You can see that the user agent was the Coder Studio HTTP client. And you can see that the custom header was not sent with it because it's unchecked. And then finally, we have the JSON body that was sent as well, and the user is there as well. You can also download the response. For example, I can press the download button here and then save the JSON for it. There is also a preview. So for example, if you want to preview HTML, so you could do something like this. So for example, if we send that, that's going to automatically select the browser preview for you. So the next tab is for the cookies. So this response doesn't have any cookie, but you can view them here. And the last tab is for the headers. So there you can see all the headers that came with the response. Alright, another thing that is nice with the HTTP client is that we support variables. So sometime when you test your request, your HTTP endpoint, you want to try them out with random values to see how they behave with value that you might not expect. So to use a variable in the HTTP client, simply use any of the fields. So it's supported in parameters, in the body, in the authentication, and in the headers as well. So hit the square bracket, and when you do so, you'll see content assist appearing. That's giving you a description of what the variable is doing, and also what kind of data you can expect from it. So for example, let's use city. Alright, press enter. Let's try it also in JSON. So for example, let's say full name, and let's send the request. Alright, so now if we look at our request, you can see that the query parameter has a random city, and then you can see that the JSON message also has a random name. So if we send that again, we get something different again. So that's very useful for testing your request. And if you want to take a look at what are all the available variables, you can click on the button over here next to the response, and you have a dialog with the list of all the variables. You can search them and then you can try them out. For example, we could try street. So then you can hit the refresh button here, and you can preview the value. Alright, so now that we have a configured request, we might want to save it. By the way, the HTTP client is persisting all the requests that you are configuring here. So you don't have to worry if you close the HTTP client. You can come back to it and your request event, the unsaved one, will be ready for you. So to save a request, you can use the Command S shortcut to save. So when you save a request, you have to save it in a group. So group is like a folder of requests. So you can save multiple requests to it so that you stay organized. So over here, you can edit the name and description again. And here you have to select a group. So we don't have any group. So we're going to create one. So let's say my cool group. And then just like for the request, you can add a description. And you can also use Markdown there. All right, let's save. So now let's save again for the request. And now you can see on the left side here, I have my request appearing. And you can save multiple requests in a folder, like I say. So let's try to save something else. Let's make a get HTTP cool. Let's do something like test. So let's save that with another name. My super request. So you can save it into the same group. So now, for example, we can close them and then reopen them. And also you get some nice tooltip in there. So if I hover over that, I can get the URL, etc., and the description using the Markdown. Same thing for the other requests, and then for the groups. And also you can search requests using multiple search parameters. For example, the name. So let's search for something containing OW. You can search using the HTTP methods. For example, if you want only the GET request, you get that one. And you can also use patterns for the URL. So for example, I can say anything with /test and I get the GET request that we just saved. All right. So now I'm going to show you another great thing that you can do with the HTTP client is test the services that you created. So you can test any kind of service. So the Gloop one, Flux, Groovy, and even your REST APIs. So let's start with Gloop. So let's pick Gloop service over here. Let's resize that. So for example, this service here takes a name as input. It's a string and it has some comment and default value. So if I want to invoke that in the HTTP client, I can simply right click on the file and say invoke in HTTP client. I can drag the file, drop it into the UI, and then request will be generated for me. So you can see that the name is set to be with the namespace. I have the body that is set, so you can see the name and other parameters. I have also the authentication that is set, so you can see that it's using variables here as well, so it will use the active user of my registered integrate instance. And it's also setting the headers for you. And the URL here is the invoke URL, so it's exposed automatically as an HTTP service. So let's try to give it something and invoke it. There we get a response. So within a second, you can configure a request and then test it within the HTTP client. Now let's try with ad hoc request, ad hoc REST request. So let's say we have get, and then the path would be say hello, and then maybe name as path parameter. So let's save again. Now let's close this one and drag it again here. So you can see that this time, because this request has REST properties, then we can invoke it differently. So it's gonna prefer that when you test your request. So it's setting up the URL, the name, you can see that now it's setting up the path parameter, and you can see that it has a default value and it has the description from the group property. So we can send that right away. And you can see that it works as well. So you can do that with Flux. So let's take a Flux. Same thing, you can just drop it in there. It will set up the body for you with comments, set up the authentication, the URL. We can just send it. There we get a response. Then you can even do that with your Groovy services. So for the Groovy services, you have two choices as well. You can invoke it using the menu, or even better, if you are within your Groovy service, you can click on the green arrow over here. And you can see that here I have a service that takes a name parameter and that respond with a map. So I can click on that and say invoke say hello in HTTP client. So when I click on that, I'm gonna have a new request configured with the URL. The name is set as well with the class name and the method. And you can see in the body, I have my name parameter, and the description is extracted from the Java doc, so that's nice as well. So let's enter name, invoke it, and there I get my response. So the last one is for the REST API. So for example, we have a REST API here, the LOU service, or the HTTP client service, for example. So the way you can test your REST API is the same thing. You can drag it. So when you drag it, it will configure all the possible operation in your REST API. But you can also drag a path, for example. So for example, if I drag this one, it's setting up the name, the parameters, so we can fill that up. Config code will be ph. Send that. And there we get a response. You can also drag individual operations. So I can, for example, get the get operation, drop it. So that's the same thing. Parameter gonna be invoke it. There we get a response. And for all of the services, another way to create a request for them is to simply drop them on the tree over here. So when you do like that, you'll be able to save all the requests that's going to be generated for you into a group. So for example, let's say test my API. Save that. And then you can see that it created a group with the three possible operation in that REST API. So we have a get, a post, etc. So it's creating the request for you. So then you can open them and test them, etc. So if you have a large service with a lot of operation, you can simply drag it there, and then it's going to create all the requests for you. If you, for example, want to add only one operation to your group already created, you can do that as well. So for example, I can drop this operation here and say save it to test my API group, and then you can see that the operation are added as well. So that's all for this new HTTP client, and you can see how convenient it is to test your services very rapidly when they are exposed over HTTP. So that's all for this video, and thanks for watching.